Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about Robin Williams' death and the media and public response as it relates to global health diplomacy and international public relations. So to kind of start off, just some background information, Robin Williams died on August 11th, 2014, and his cause of death was suicide by hanging. So the initial response was that the news of his death kind of circulated around the globe pretty quickly. Journalists and media professionals, as well as social media users and international celebrities, comment on the passing of Robin Williams. Some of the key countries that were involved with the conversation was America, Canada, India, New Zealand, Australia, and England. A lot of the articles that I read had had celebrities in these countries kind of pouring out their grief about of his death. So this obviously affected people all over the world. So the first thing I want to talk about is the effect on the United States public. So following the 4 months after Robin Williams' death, suicide rates increased by 10%. That's nearly 2,000 additional deaths in the 4 months following Robin Williams' suicide. And the number of unexpected deaths were highest in males 30 to 44 years old. There was also a 32% increase in the use of hanging as a method of suicide, which is the same method Robin Williams used, and that's in comparison to a 3% increase in the other forms of suicide. On the other side, the hotline's rates also increased. So the day after Robin Williams' death, the hotline received the most calls in a day ever. I think it was somewhere around 7,300. And the numbers have kind of stayed increased since then. Some speculations, there's two different kind of sides that people are on. The first is that people are seeing similar urges within themselves, feeling the same kind of want to commit suicide, and that's why they're reaching out. But the other option is that more people are receiving resources for care. So having an open conversation about suicide is kind of prompting calls to the suicide hotline. So there was an effect as well on the international public, kind of a comparison at first with the Williams situation, and then there was also some articles that just talked about the general numbers internationally for celebrity suicide. Public response. So in Canada, suicides were examined in the same 4 months that they were examined in America. And there was actually a 16% increase in suicides in the 4 months following his death. That isn't just an interesting statistic that it was higher in Canada, but on an international level, when celebrities commit suicide, there's an average of a 13% increase in the 2 months following the death. That's a high number considering that there was only a 6% increase during the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Another thing that I thought was really interesting and kind of related to the Robin Williams case was that when the method of suicide is reported, the method is increased in usage by 30%. In Robin Williams' case in America, it was increased by 32%, which is a little higher. And there's some reasoning that I believe is maybe why that is higher than the international average. So there's some regulations within media. The World Health Organization has guidelines for reporting celebrity suicide. Some of those are reports should not describe the modality of suicide. They should not speculate on the reasons for suicide. They should not glorify the suicide and report on the suicide repetitively. But reports should include resources to those at risk. So in this situation, they should obviously at the end of the article put resources to suicide hotlines. So there's all of these guidelines. So there's definitely some clear work being done. However, the California Public Records Act is a law in California state legislature requiring inspection or disclosure of governmental records to the public upon request, unless exempted by law. So it was required by law that the details in the autopsy report of Robin Williams' death be shared with the public. My argument would be that they probably shouldn't be, considering the World Health Organization guidelines and the high stakes and high profile situation that this specific case had. So there were two different social media responses that I found, the first one being negative, the second one being positive. So the negative one came from the Hollywood Reporter, but I'm sure that this came from almost every news article or news outlet because the information was sensationalized. So the Hollywood Reporter shared very explicit details on the scene that Williams' body was found in, as well as speculation as to why, and the means by which he committed suicide. I think the Hollywood Reporter article disregarded every single World Health Organization regulation on suicide reporting. So I think that that's a really inappropriate way that people were experiencing the information. On the other side, Reddit did a really good job of combating some suicide ideation and tactic encouragement online by creating a volunteer program where volunteers would go and kind of monitor the conversations happening on the online forum. In which people could engage with conversations about Robin Williams' death. And if suicide ideation or tactic encouragement showed up, the volunteers would be able to kind of steer the conversation in another direction or offer support to the people that are having these conversations. The World Health Organization regulations are, I would argue, not effective enough, considering that they're only regulations and not law. So 24% of Canadian articles went into detail about the methods used in Robin Williams' suicide. 46% of US articles went into the methods. 14% romanticized the act. 27% of US articles romanticized it. 1 in 4 Canadian articles gave details about where to seek help, and only 1 in 10 US articles gave details about where to seek help. So obviously there's some differences country to country in response to the regulations of the World Health Organization, but clearly the United States has some work to do. However, it is still an international issue because other countries are also involved in the World Health Organization. So a couple things have happened since 2014 that I wanted to talk about. A lot of the research that's shown up has been updated since then or has recently come out in the past few years. But in 2020, on the 6th anniversary of Robin Williams' death, Zelda Williams, his daughter, shared mental health organization resources on her social media for those needing help. A lot of people, she claimed, kind of came to her social medias on the anniversary of his death. And so she used that as an outlet to kind of share those resources with those who may be kind of wanting to mourn the passing of her father. Also in June of 2020, Sushant Singh Rajput, an Indian actor, also committed suicide. And this kind of brought some statistics back to the surface about Robin Williams and the 10% increase following his death, and kind of made a call for journalistic understanding and stronger regulation in suicide reporting. So best practices with global health diplomacy and connecting it to international public relations in my research. Global health diplomacy, as Adams et al. In 2008 kind of discussed, is the understanding that health problems in one country are affecting health problems in another, and then it's important to kind of understand how global health messages are impacting global health behaviors. I think in this situation, journalists and people in general responded poorly to the World Health Organization regulations, and also I think they responded poorly to best practices. I think the outcomes of the raised percentage of suicides and the raised percentage of hotline calls are expected based on the literature. So there was a quote by Thomas Niederkrotenthaler that I think kind of sums it up. Moving forward, what we need to focus on. And he says that reporters must consider more carefully the costs to population health of sensationalist detailed reports of these tragic deaths. So I think moving forward, we must consider laws and the impact of social media's relation to ideation and sensationalism. So the World Health Organization has regulations, but I don't think that these are in laws. And I think that people are kind of doing what they want with reports. And I also think social media is a place where this is a problem because the World Health Organization does not monitor social media conversations. So how are we going to monitor these conversations similar to a way that Reddit did? And how are we going to monitor people that are responsible, the journalists and the reporters? How are we going to help them understand the impact that the way they're reporting could affect the people around them and the publics that they're reporting to? So there was kind of three themes that I found that connected to my research. The first was suicide contagion. That's not really what it was called in my research. It's kind of a new term, but the themes and the general overview of it connect pretty consistently with the literature. So a lot of the articles that I read compared Robin Williams' death to that of Marilyn Monroe in 1962 and that of Kurt Cobain in 1994. Suicide contagion is basically the concept that celebrity suicides or suicides in general kind of are contagious. Also, the Werther effect was kind of the first place that this came up. The 1774 novel, The Sorrow of Young Werther, depicted a suicide, and in the following months after publication, the suicide rates for young men in Germany and throughout Europe increased drastically, and there was some copycat suicide where they were kind of using the similar methods of suicide. So it's called the Werther effect, suicide contagion, or copycat suicide, and this is a huge issue with celebrities. The article that the research that I found to kind of relate was the Arden et al. 2017 article discussing the TV show 13 Reasons Why. 13 Reasons Why, kind of the concern following this TV show was that of suicide contagion, because they depicted the graphic suicide explicitly, and they kind of glorified suicide and kind of perpetrated the notion that there are no other options. One of the articles I read actually brought 13 Reasons Why up and argued that it does not follow the World Health Organization guidelines. Another kind of theme that I found was the media conversation and the possible negative outcomes. Cultivation theory, according to Johnson et al., states that our worldview is shaped by what we see on TV and media. We have a lot of trouble as people kind of separating television in our day-to-day lives. So that's something that we really need to take into consideration when we're thinking about what we're going to put on TV. Johnson et al. Also discussed smoking intention. They found that women who viewed smoking on television were more likely to engage in smoking behaviors and less likely to refuse smoking. And I would argue that there seems to be a possible link for all intention throughout. So kind of what we're talking about on media is perpetrating our behaviors in publics. So there's been pushback from journalists who claim that the evidence does not warrant change in reporting techniques. And I think this is a very dangerous perspective from the viewpoint of journalists. The last thing I want to talk about is a little more positive, and it's the last theme that I found connected, and it was starting the conversation and the possible positives. So the one thing that seemed to be a positive outcome from this was the increase in hotline calls. So similar to the Song et al. 2017 finding that found PSAs increased hotline calls in South Korea, which is one of the highest countries for suicide rates in the world. Having that conversation is increasing suicide hotline calls. I'd be interested to see research to see if hotline calls decrease suicide rates, but definitely having a space in which people in crisis have the resources presented to them is super important. This was also kind of reflected in the Chapman et al. Study, where a celebrity with breast cancer kind of posted her story on in the media, and people were more likely to get mammograms. So this could mean that exposure leads to better awareness. So there's a really fine line we have to walk in terms of how we're reporting things. Are we reporting things to raise awareness and create a safe environment, or are we reporting things for the sensationalistic drama of it all? How are journalists truly reporting? Where is their intention? And are they using the guidelines presented to them to support a better understanding? So that is the end of my presentation. I appreciate you guys listening. I would love to hear your questions in the comments, and I would love to have a conversation about this. I think this topic is super important, and I appreciate your guys' feedback. Thank you.